A legendary weekend in the Lou. PGA Tour champions compete in the Stifel Charity Classic, presented by Compliance Solutions, September 4th through 7th, and COAR. Perform live with your Friday ticket. Visit StifelCharityClassic.com today.
And welcome into the Card Central postgame show here on STL Sports Central. He is Brenden Schaeffer. I am Chris Pelikan. Cards fall 4-3 in their first game of the weekend set with the New York Yankees. A game full of missed opportunities, Brenden. Tough one for sure. Cards fall a game below 500 at this point in time in the season. And, all in all, just not a great night. A lot to chew on for sure, which we will most certainly do. And folks, obviously, per usual, we recommend you jump into the chat here on YouTube, and while you are in there or while you're surfing around, please hit the like and subscribe buttons to join us here in the STL Sports Central family. Brenden, your thoughts on a game, like I said, chock full of missed opportunities, untimely misses for the Cardinals starting pitchers, and, again, a one that you think, looking back, had a lot of chances to get on the right side of this thing and never ended up doing it.
Yeah, some numbers that stand out for the Cardinals tonight. I mean, Andre Pallante, it's been an uneven run for him recently. Jeremy brings up the double plays that the Cardinals consistently were hitting into. Couldn't get that key hit late with runners in scoring position to make it a brand new ball game. Pallante's night, interesting. He has the big strikeout day, but you know what jumps out is the long ball and the 3 walks. The bullpen comes in and gives you some scoreless innings, but even the bullpen giving up free passes. 7 walks by Cardinal pitchers tonight. Frustrating game because they never were really out of it, but they just couldn't quite get back over the hump after another, like I said, an uneven start, I think would be the way I would frame it from Andre Pallante.
Yeah, and it's a great way to put it. Again, we will get to more of the game, but I think it's probably worth chatting about Andre Pallante and what we continue to sort of glean from his starts. Obviously the runway year thing is happening. It seems fairly certain that most fans and pretty much the front office has moved their attention or shifted their attention more towards 2026 at this point in time. And with Andre Pallante, I think that, it seems there's more evidence every game as to whether or not what you see from each of these pitchers. Right. And people are jockeying for position in 2026, et cetera. With Andre Pallante, I mean, I don't know that I could be more confused about what we really have in this guy. Because again, to your point, there were a lot of nice moments for Andre Pallante tonight. 8 strikeouts. Once he got through the first and settled down, he looked pretty good. But again, you can't put your team in a 3-0 hole, right? And obviously the walks were what doomed him in the first inning. And then a Jazz Chisholm, he left a pitch up to him and he roped one out over the right field wall. Brenden, where are you at with Andre Pallante at this point in time? Because like I said, this is not all bad. This isn't like end of life, Eric Fetty type stuff where there's zero redeeming. I mean, Andre Pallante has had some really nice moments for this team this year, but then again too, having nice moments, or even if they're more plentiful than the bad ones, that doesn't cut it in baseball. You make the mistakes, you give up 4 runs in 5 innings, that sort of thing. I mean, are you really giving your team a chance to win? I love that he bounced back from a tough start to the game. Having said that, what do we take from the fact that there was the tough start in the first place?
Yeah, and I mean, you can't just isolate it to tonight either. You mentioned right. When the good moments are more plentiful than the bad, you can live with it a little bit more, but you can't always get away with it. But you could make a real strong argument that for the past month plus, the good has not outweighed the bad for Pallante. I mean, he's had stat lines of 7 earned, 5 earned, 5 earned, and then went 0 earned, 2 earned before falling back in that Cubs start last weekend, 6 earned runs, and then tonight 4 more. It's been a rough go for Andre Pallante. It is frustrating because of what you mentioned. If it were as simple as the dude stinks, I mean, and that's kind of how we felt at the end with Eric Fetty, where you knew what you were going to get and you didn't really like it. with Pallante, there's a little bit of that redeemability in there to make you wonder, okay, is this guy just a corner away from turning things around? I don't know that there's a lot of signs right now that he is, but I know that over the long haul, we've seen a sample size. Last year, he was really one of the Cardinals' most effective starters.
Right.
And when you see an 8 strikeout game, you're like, well, maybe he's not too far off, but the consistency has just been, again, if it's 5 out of your last 7 have been really, really rough starts, and then you've had 2 good ones, that's not a mix that's going to get you by. The problem is, like, with the way we're viewing this Cardinals team and what we're expecting from the front office and even extending that to ownership, I don't know that they're going to go out and spend a bunch. We know that they're going to be tight for finding a rotation for next year. We kind of mentally plotted out a Sonny Gray, Liberatore, McGreevy, and then Pallante, and then a mystery guest at number 5. Like, you can't just count this Pallante spot for 2026 as automatic. I think there has to at least be, from Heimblum and a little bit of a willingness from ownership, to go out and say, hey, we've got to add some competition to come in spring training, because we can't just, if Pallante goes the rest of the way and is about the same, he's a 5 ERA guy, and that's just not really going to get the job done. Even if 2026 is not your year to really take a big leap forward, if you're the Cardinals, like, that would be an unfortunate status quo. If we see a full season from Pallante, which I'm cool with, he could be a runway guy and you let it play out for this year. But then if you don't see a market difference coming into next year, I don't think that you can at this point just attribute a spot to him automatically. Like, Quinn Matthews could be a prospect from down below that gets a look by February. But otherwise, I think it's pretty lean. And so it'll be telling this offseason, how aggressive will the Cardinals be in going out to acquire rotation competition. That doesn't mean you're spending, a $12 million contract on like a 1 year for a Lance Lynn type or a Kyle Gibson type. But it should mean, I think, a couple candidates where you're not afraid to throw a few $1,000,000 at something, or to make a trade for an intriguing arm that maybe hasn't put it all together, but you need that additional competition, I think, to at least settle the fan base that, like, we're not just going to roll over in 2026, because a lot of people feel like they've rolled over in 2025 with the way at least the front office and ownership approached everything. They didn't really add to this team. We know that. They're still a decent team. They're going to be around 500 this year. Right now, a game below that. I just think as you're looking forward, what we've seen from Pallante over the last month plus is not enough to just automatically pencil him in next year. At a minimum, you bring in additional competition. And by the way, he's an ARB2 guy as well. So that's a couple million. What will the Cardinals do with that? I don't know that it, has devolved into non-tender candidacy, but I think you have to bring in a couple more guys at that similar $2 to $3 to $5 million price point to say, you know what, if some of this money ends up being dead money, okay, but we need competition. We need to act like there's a standard here, and the rotation has not met it, especially of late in 2025.
Well, and it's funny you mentioned that, and I talk a little bit. And I'll be the first one to say that as of about a month ago, I felt very good about the concept of a rotation in 26, where the back 3 were McGreevy, Pallante, and Liberatore. Right. Like, and so that implies that Sonny Gray's up there, and then they're going to go out and they're going to grab somebody from a team that doesn't want to pay a guy who's an ARB1 or an ARB2. Right. Like, you get into, you go and you track down the Marlins, or you track down the A's and a team, and you go find somebody who can get 2 years of control for, make the deal, but you've got to go front end of the rotation. Right. I just think that if McGreevy is your 2 or Liberatore is your 2, like you're struggling at that point in time, I think, to put together a very deep rotation. And I think that your point is very well taken on Pallante, because I think at this point in time, even if they do bring in somebody who they would, pencil into a higher end of the rotation, Pallante right now is your 5th guy, right? Like, I think short of them bringing in, like you said, a veteran on a 1 year, $5 million deal, something like that. But Pallante is your 5th guy at the moment. I don't hate the spot, only because, like you mentioned, Quinn Matthews, he's a good name. Pallante next year, even as an ARB2, isn't going to be making a ton of money. If Quinn Matthews outpitches him in spring training, you don't feel terrible about moving that there. Let's say Liam Doyle ends up being a fast riser, right? Like, again, I don't know, Andre Pallante on the back end, as a guy who was flashed, right? Like, he shows good moments at times, and then obviously the inconsistency has been what's led to that 5 ERA. But if you told me tomorrow that they would take care of the top end of their rotation. They'd go in next year with Pallante as their 5, with the caveat that maybe we grab somebody late in spring training on a short-term deal. You know, the spot is there for Quinn Matthews and or Liam Doyle to eventually grab. You know, I don't hate that. And I do think that Pallante has shown enough over his time in St. Louis to be a guy who I think we still have to pencil in the rotation at this point in time as a back end guy, as the first one, you know, last in, first out, you know, and because it's just, again, I mean, you watch tonight's game and it's just these small moments, you know, and again, I mean, I saw a few comments about pitching coach and Dusty Blake and this and that. You know, doesn't Pallante feel like the kind of guy who's a couple of tweaks away from being really serviceable? You know, I don't know. I mean, because
I mean, I go back and forth on that though, because last year we saw exactly that ERA in the 3s while he was a member of the rotation, and that's certainly serviceable. But like, is it a case where now the league sort of catches up? And I saw some commentary. I had it up there on the screen for a moment, where the thought is like, okay, if he's pitching to the bottom of the zone, and if you're not chasing the pitch that just kind of dips below the zone, that's kind of a good area for him to get some strikeouts. That's where even more walks come in. And if guys aren't chasing the stuff, if they start to see it, pick it up, and recognize it, then Pallante can get into some trouble like that. I don't know that there's just a quick fix. A lot of it has been for him when he's really not on. The repertoire is a little bit limited. The pitches that are effective against lefties maybe aren't the same pitches that are effective against righties. And can he run that fastball in on the right-hander to be able to keep him honest and keep him off, you know, a breaking pitch, diving away from them, those sorts of things. And like, he just hasn't had the consistency, I think, this year of his repertoire. Last outing couldn't really locate the curveball, and you know, he was out of that game before the second inning was over against the Cubs. So I could see the positive side of it, that, yeah, like, proof of concept has been there for him to be somebody that's a tweak or two away. And like, to the point of the commenters that are kind of harping on Dusty Blake, that is, you know, that is the design of what a pitching coach is there to do, hopefully, is say, hey, we've seen you at your best. Here's what it looks like when you're at your best, and here's where you're right now falling short of that mark. The price is right. To your point, I think it's one of the biggest reasons that the Cardinals, and they're just attrition, their lack of options other than Pallante would be a reason. But like I said, I don't think that's something that right now, even if they do have him penciled in, I can see why that would be underwhelming to a fan base that's looking and saying, man, we rode Eric Fetty pretty hard on the way out of town. Pallante's last month and a week has been just as bad statistically as that was from Fetty.
It's a good point. It's a good point. This is the Card Central postgame show sponsored by DraftKings here on STL Sports Central. He is Brenden Schaeffer. I'm Chris Pelikan. Folks, we need you in those comment boxes. It looks like we've got some good conversation going fast and heavy here. And while you are in there, please hit the like and subscribe button. So
people say I need energy drinks tonight, Chris. I'm too mellow. No. I wonder what it is. Like, this was a weird game though that kind of does mellow you out, because it isn't one of those games where you're just fired up angry. I guess you could be over the state of things, like the Rockies stuff that had me fired up angry.
Yeah.
At this point, it's like the Pallante beginning of the game was the same as what we saw against the Cubs, was able to settle it in, strike some guys out. Great. And then the offense, you're kind of chugging up the hill. You get the big swing by Vic. You get the wild pitch. You're there. You're one swing away, but they couldn't find that additional swing. And then the bullpen's kind of working around traffic. You're waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like, the Yankees go up 6-3, and then you realize, okay, it's done. That never even happened.
Right.
But the offense still couldn't find a punch. It was a weird game to feel about. And by the way, like, it's a season that kind of feels that way as well. After that Rockies series, like, I was ready for this weekend to be one where you go, okay, Cardinals come off of 2 big series wins over playoff teams. They beat the Rockies. Now it's really time to see what they're made of against the Yankees. That was kind of removed from the conversation with how they just fell flat in the final 2 games against Colorado. So if I'm mellow, I think it's more a culmination of what's happened over the previous week, you know?
The apathy setting in a little bit, you know, I get it. Let's talk about
that's no excuse for Colin Cowherd. We may get into that, but I understand there is some apathy in the room.
I got that. I want to talk about the bullpen real quick. And again, in the whole, you know, in the spectrum of, we're looking at 26, right? We see 4 shutout innings from Jorge Alcala, from Matt Swanson and Ryan Fernandez. Swanson going the final 2, 4 strikeouts, 4 walks from that group. You know, I mean, I don't want to spend a ton of time on it, Brenden, but your thoughts. Obviously, again, 4 shutout innings from any bullpen is going to be a good night. Did you see anything you liked from the newest Cardinal, Jorge Alcala, and a recent waiver pickup, or Ryan Fernandez, who's, obviously a guy this has been a disappointing season for him coming back up, or even Matt Swanson. Anything jump out to you about the 4 shutout innings from the bullpen tonight?
I liked Alcala's inning, and I want to see some more of him because, look, if we're going to do this conversation like has recently happened from Mozeliak regarding the likes of Quinn Matthews and J.J. Weatherholt, where they say, well, it's not their protection year from the Rule 5, so maybe not in the club's best interest to call them up. Crazy to me, as I've talked about, but if a guy like Alcala is one of the names you're looking at to say, hey, on the periphery of the 40-man, we have some guys that we maybe want to get a look at before we're willing to cast people aside. They just brought him in, and maybe he's got something. So, yeah, I want to see more from him for sure over the next month and a half. Fernandez, look, I'm not saying that he's ready to be one of those 40-man casualties for me. However, it's the same as it ever was. I know he got through a scoreless inning. The walks have been brutal for him this season, and he didn't really have that problem last year. And from April, when we saw him and he kept imploding, to when they've brought him back, and even when he was with Memphis in between, that was kind of his story as well down in the minors this year. So Fernandez didn't show me anything different than what I'd already seen. I like seeing Swanson not have a perfect outing and be able to work out of it. I'll give him a little bit more credit because we've seen some really good stuff from him recently. The purpose, like, it seems as though once his role elevated, we've seen him hit another gear. And if I'm looking forward to next year, thinking about 7th, 8th, 9th inning guys, he's a candidate for me, especially if the Cardinals try to do another bullpen on the cheap where they're not doing much other than like an ad of a Phil Maton caliber. So I'd like to see that from Swanson, that because again, the offense kind of fell flat, but in a realm where they come up with a big swing in the bottom of the 9th, that Swanson inning to hold it together in the top of the 9th ends up being pretty crucial. I know that it doesn't happen, and so it's very easy to dismiss it and say, doesn't matter. And functionally, it didn't matter. But I do like to see that because I think it could be telling about the role that Matt Swanson could be filling, not only going forward in 2025, but as we start to kind of think about next year as well.
Yeah, 98 with run plays, man. As long as he can spot that, as long as he can spot it. Interesting moment in this one, Brendan. Curious in your take on. So Mason Winn, second inning. Anyone who watched the game saw Ben Rice hit a complete rope right up the middle. Right, defense was positioned perfectly. Mason Winn's right there, hits off his glove. Ben Rice gets on. I think they said exit velocity on that one, 107 miles an hour. The initial scoring, E6. And I don't really know that anyone who watched that said, you even saw Mason Winn kind of walk off and under his breath mutter an obscenity. He knew he should have had that one. Again, it was hit very hard. No two ways about it. So credited with an error, the 46-game errorless streak comes to an end, right? Oh, wait, later in the game, we get a score change. And that is that Ben Rice error the Mason Winn error on a Ben Rice hit was ruled a hit. Your thoughts on that play? And look, I don't want to make light of this. Mason Winn is having a Gold Glove caliber season at shortstop. There is zero ands, ifs, or buts about that. I mean, he is a centerpiece defensively for any team at this point in time. But, the home cooking a little bit, sort of funny because when I watched that play, I didn't think about the streak, but I'm like, that's a play that Mason Winn wants back all day, every day.
Yeah, and I think earlier this week I checked the leaderboard for Baseball Savant. His outs above average was up to 22. It currently sits at 21. The good news is second place is 18. So he's 3 better than everybody else in the league. Pete Crow Armstrong is one of the several guys that has 18, Bobby Witt, Brian Hayes. So, he has been, by at least that measure, the best defensive player in the sport and by a pretty good margin. Defensive runs saved has him lagging behind a little bit, and that's kind of your difference with the various defensive metrics. You can kind of pick and choose, and it paints a total picture, I think, when you look at all of them. But he's been very, very good. Here's what I'll say about that play. And again, like you said, we're not making light, but it is one of those where if there's a 46-game errorless streak, does it maybe get looked at a little bit differently than if there's not? I think there's a case to be made for that. But at the same time, when you can, there's also an argument. Obviously, it got overturned. Somebody somewhere had the decision process of, look, 107 off the bat. Yeah, it wasn't right at him either. He had to take a sidestep to it. So you could probably have enough cover to change that, and they did. He's been very, very good, though. But that's one of those little baseball idiosyncrasies where you kind of go, okay, in a room somewhere, somebody was having a very, very interesting conversation surrounding that play tonight. But Mason Winn has been as good as anybody in the league. So maybe he's earned himself one like that, where you get a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. Like, hey, if he didn't catch it, maybe it's not supposed to be caught, even though we feel visually like if you can get a glove on it at that position, it's a play you make.
Absolutely. All right. I wanted to throw another little topic out there, Brendan, one that I know that you jumped on a little earlier in the game. So the attendance tonight, 31,000. So a little bit more than what we've been seeing more often than not with this team. The Cards, when we've started seeing some of the attendance numbers of late, and right now they currently rank 19th in the bigs in attendance this year, which, you rewind 5 years and that sounds like that's sacrilege, that this is not St. Louis Cardinals baseball and the fans, blah, blah, blah. In any case, Colin Cowherd, for whatever reason, one of the nation's loudest and biggest voices, decided to jump on Twitter and get after the Cardinal fans for ranking 19th in attendance. And you took none too kindly to that, did you?
I mean, I just didn't. I got some thoughts about it. So his tweet said St. Louis is currently 19th in attendance. There was an argument. It was the most rabid and loyal baseball city in America less than 10 years ago. That's what Colin tweeted today at 4:30 p.m. Central Time, which I guess he probably looked at the schedule and noticed the Yankees were in town, and that's the only reason he's acknowledging the Cardinals' existence today. But my response, and I thought long and hard, like, do I even get involved? Because people see it, and then some people say I'm dunking on him, and others will say, you're just trying to latch on to a bigger name in sports media with, trying to stir up some drama. But I said, hey, I remember that too, because it was around that same time that you last provided insight on baseball. Because honestly, and I used to really appreciate Colin Cowherd. Like, he would have his different shows. He's not on ESPN anymore. He's on Fox Sports, but I used to think he was pretty level with it. And then as guys get bigger and bigger in media, they kind of become this almost caricature of themselves. And so, like, he's had a great national success. But if you were ever to flip on his show or scroll his Twitter feed, what's he talking about? He's talking about the NFL. He's talking about the NBA. And that's pretty much it. And it could be June 10th, and that's still going to be what he's talking about. It doesn't matter the month of the year. Like, baseball is not really going to rate when it comes to Colin Cowherd. Respectfully, I'm not sure the extent to which he's paying attention, which is evidenced by the tweet when he says, well, it was almost a decade ago or almost 10 years ago. It's like, well, the Cardinals' last real good run before the decline, the first level of decline, was 2015. So it's almost like, when did he kind of tune out? When did he? So I was poking fun a little bit at that, because I feel like it's kind of bad form to, and he would know in his heart of hearts, and he'd probably be the first to admit, yeah, our audience is football, it's NBA, so we talk more about that stuff. The only time he's talking baseball is to draw a point of comparison to the NFL or the NBA and to say, here's where baseball gets it wrong and these sports get it right. I've seen that from him. I also saw, and I Googled him, like, when is Cowherd talking baseball? There was a segment from him a couple of years ago where, before Ohtani became a Dodger, okay, we could talk Ohtani on our national show. That's fair game. He said the Angels should trade Ohtani for draft picks. And then he had to be told that it's not a thing in baseball. So, like, that's the context where I'm saying, like, clearly the man is not locked in on this sport, and it's okay. It's not like a love my sport sort of thing, but it is like, hey, have some respect to understand that, yeah, Cardinals attendance is down. The St. Louis Cardinals as an organization, though, have been continuing to exist for the decade that you haven't been paying attention to baseball. Like, they have their own intricacies year in, year out. They have their storylines. They have things that are happening, complexities surrounding the team and the city that are going on, that you can't just dive bomb in and go, well, St. Louis, remember, they said they were the BFIP. And then, like, that's your take. To me, that's bad form. So I had a little fun with that, and leave it at that, other than kind of talking about it here, just because it's like, we get it. It's all we've been talking about ad nauseum for multiple years, is that, hey, the Cardinals' performance is lagging. They wanted patience from Cardinals fans. And then suddenly they say, by the way, we're kind of retooling. And everybody goes, does that mean rebuild? And they go, no, we're not using that word. It's like, so we're still being gaslit? It's like, yeah, a little bit. So I just don't think it's a fair representation to look at St. Louis fans and say, well, you were supposed to be the baseball city, when Colin couldn't probably tell you very much of what's gone on with the St. Louis Cardinals over this supposed time period that he's purported to be talking about. I was just waiting to get bingo on my bingo card. All he had to do was then reply and connect it to the fact that the Rams left St. Louis, and I would have had bingo. That was going to be the final, and I was going to be able to go collect my prize at the desk. But I don't know. That just kind of rubbed me the wrong way, because there are conversations to be had about the attendance. We do it all the time. It just feels like maybe a cheap shot when clearly you looked for the first time in a long time to go, well, what's going on with St. Louis, without really having any desire to really do more than one tweet. His other tweet today was, did you know you could mix tea and vodka? I just found that out. It's summertime, baby. So like, I thought that was a little bit fast and loose from a guy that, look, he's Teflon because he is a huge name in sports media. But I was like, are we really doing this? You of all people, like, you're not really in it on the baseball stuff anymore, and that's okay. But then don't try to be for one cheap shot. I didn't think that was fair.
I would agree with that. And stay in your lane there, Mr. Cowherd, because again, it's just, this is not where we're going for high-level Cardinal discussion at this point in time. So Cards do lose tonight, 4-3 to the Yankees. They do fall a game below 500 for the first time in a little while. Still 3.5 back in the wild card, which is funny to even say because the Reds and the Mets both lose tonight. So again, this really is a race to the bottom. But a couple other things, I guess, from the game tonight to discuss. Offensively, where are you at with the runway stuff? Okay. Because again, we look at tonight and 4 double plays hit in 2. That's going to kill you any point in time. 5th inning, they've got runners on 2nd and 3rd with no outs. They don't get anyone in. You get multiple strikeouts from Gorman, Nootbaar, Walker, and Sajaci tonight. Like, can we at least, I'm curious your thoughts again, is everything that we talk about pertaining to games ends up having some hue of 26 on it.
Yeah.
Who do you see, Brendan, out of this group that you think, I'm not going to say that we pencil in because you never know what's going to happen in the off seasons, but I'm curious who you would say you would like to have back in this lineup in 2026.
I think inherently part of that is who can I get value for that's fair relative to how the league is going to perceive players. I want to see players traded in the offseason, not because I know which ones stink and which ones are great, but because you have to clear the deck. You have to shake it up. And there has been such a hesitance to do that from John Mozeliak. And now is it like, well, I'm so close to the end, I'll leave it to the next guy. Fine. It's interesting, though. I saw this from 101 ESPN earlier in the week where Buster Olney shared with BK and Ferrario, rival executives had sort of painted a picture of Chaim Bloom as an executive that was a little bit, I forget the word that they used, uncertain, though. He agonized over trade decisions. And you go, well, wait a minute. That's what the current guy clearly does. They don't really. I don't think
he actually agonized, Brendan. I think he just decides I'm not doing it.
He just doesn't do them.
I might lose the trade. Can't do it.
And unless it's the type of trade that you almost know you're losing, but you don't care because it's time to move on from a player. Tyler O'Neill, Dylan Carlson, those types of deals. And it's like you sap the value from those players to the extent that now you've got nothing left to do but to kick them off the bridge.
Yep.
That's the part where I'm like, man, if Chaim Bloom learned anything from his tenure in Boston, that's what I hope it is. I hope it is find a little bit of AJ Preller in you, find a little Jerry DiPoto in you. Those are guys that'll make trades. They'll be right, they'll be wrong, but they'll be decisive about it, and then they'll move forward to make the next one. You can't look back and say, oh my gosh, can you believe? And part of this is like Cardinals fans, and I'm not blaming Cardinals fans for doing it because it's relevant when they said it. But like, oh, can you believe we traded Alcantara and Zach Gallen for a couple of years of Ozuna, who was kind of a bum when he was here? Like that can become a little bit pervasive, but then it shouldn't bleed into it. If you are running a baseball organization, there's only 30 of them, and you've got one of the top executive gigs in the world when it comes to the sport. You can't let that stuff impact your willingness to do the next trade. And at a certain point, either that has happened or I have no clue as to why John Mozeliak and his front office have approached trade decisions the way that they have. It's kicking the can down the road. It's trying to hoard everybody while committing to nobody, right? And that's something that's just not tenable long term. Can the next guy come in? And so your original question was asking me like, who would I stand behind? And I don't have like a lot of great answers. I'm pretty confident you're talking Mason Winn. Like, yeah, I'm fairly confident about Burleson, but by the same token, if Wilson is still here, Contreras, that's part of tonight too. You lose him from your lineup to injury, Donovan out to injury. Do those two guys make a difference? Maybe, maybe not.
Right.
Like, is Burleson a real everyday outfielder defensively? I don't think he's terrible. I think he can get you by, but the bat, that's what we're saying you hang your hat on. And he's a fine hitter, but they got a lot of fine hitters. And a fine hitter combined with middling defense is like, okay, what's the next guy got? Because so if Burleson was a consistent 820, 830 OPS and you knew it for sure, then it's like, I don't really care what his defense is. Right now he's sitting 779 on the OPS. And like, could he play first if Wilson's not here? Yeah, but Contreras doesn't want to be traded. And so you're talking about right fielder DH. Jordan Walker, you're trying to work through it with him, but his offensive numbers have not been such that, you're just penciling him in for 2026. You don't want to let him go. He's the one guy where you go, man, if he turns into a star somewhere else, it'll really hurt. Because with the others, you feel like you've seen enough to make a decision. Gorman, he's not a terrible player, but he's a mid defender, and he is right now, overall middling bat. He provides raw power, so you're tantalized. But if he goes somewhere else and does the same stuff, but maybe hits 5 or 10 more home runs than what he's done here, are you going to be regretting it? I think you know what kind of player he is. It's a fine player, but you have to make some decisions somewhere. And so that's where I'm like, Mason Winn, I'm in on that. I'm in on Victor Scott II. I know he's like one of the lesser bats in the lineup. I'm a believer that Victor Scott II is going to be a tenable enough bat, and he is an unbelievable defender as well. I can live with that up the middle with my shortstop and my center fielder maybe being two of my lesser bats. Catcher, they got to figure out, if that's going to be Pajes or if it's going to be something else next year. But otherwise, any one of those guys could theoretically be dealt. Probably not Herrera. Herrera, I think his bat is good enough, but he's in that Burleson conversation of defensively, what do you do? So that's a good news and a bad news scenario for Chaim Bloom. I've got a lot of guys that I can't tell you definitively that they're the anchors to build around, but also none of them have no value. Like, go ask Preller, go ask DePoto, go ask the Dodgers, go ask these guys. Which guys do you want? Which guys will you give me a controllable arm for? I'll attach a double-A prospect on the pitching side to do it. They almost let them dictate if you can't decide. Ideally, you'd be driving the bus on deciding. I kind of feel like that's what happened a little bit when it comes to like the Liberatore trade. Surely it was the other side going, Arozarena is the guy we want. And the Cardinals going, we kind of had him in a bucket with 3 other dudes, so thanks for picking for us. But then they're the ones identifying the talent that they want. Versus the Cardinals saying, we know that Gorman's the guy. We're going to plant our flag. And then being right. There just hasn't been enough decisiveness within the front office. I'm kind of punting on the question too, so maybe I'm part of the problem. But the difference is I don't work in the Cardinals front office. It's not my job. I am not employed to be right about this. I can sound like a blowhard on YouTube. I'd prefer not to, but I know it happens sometimes. But like, if we're comparing my ability to identify with John Mozeliak's, they haven't offered me a job. So like, that's who has to be getting this right. And now it's going to be Chaim Bloom that has to do it. I'll be on the sidelines hoping that the Cardinals come up with the right solution. I don't call it easy, but I think picking a direction would be better than just continuing to have this conversation next year where we go, we got too many. We don't know. We can't give runway to everybody. That's got to be 2025 and done. You can't then come into next year and do it again. I don't think fans are going to agree with that from a messaging standpoint.
Couldn't agree with you more on that. And I think the funny thing is, and we will never know this, but you are spot on in terms of what I would say I'm most curious about. What is the trade value of all of these guys? If we're asking me personally, I think that Herrera's shown enough that he's a guy that you keep. Donovan is a guy who I think is just going to be, again, you got to make a decision on him financially sooner than later. And that probably dictates whether or not you decide to keep him. I mean, he's going into his final season of arbitration at this point in time. But I mean, in terms of bats, I love those guys. Wynn's, I think, a centerpiece player. I think he, again, he has improved as an offensive player from when he came up. I think that'll continue. So again, he's definitely a guy, but I would love to know what real trade value Lars Nootbaar has right now. What is the trade value of Alec Burleson? What is the trade value of Nolan Gorman? Right? What is the trade value of Jordan Walker? 2 years ago, Jordan Walker probably could have gotten you, any number of high level guys who are in their late arbitration stages or guys pending free agents. At this point in time, is their value? It's an interesting, because I legitimately don't know the answer. And I think
if I had to guess, remember when at the deadline, Mozeliak was asked about that crop, mostly the left-handed hitting outfielders.
Yep.
Because there was reporting that, hey, they're getting knocks on the door. And Mozeliak said we had those conversations. We were asked about them. We weren't blown away by anything.
Yeah.
If I had to guess, the Cardinals and the league probably rank it Burley the most value because he's got more years of control and maybe more upside with the bat. Nootbaar secondary, Gorman below that. And I know Gorman's not really an outfielder, but he kind of fits into this mix as one of the lefty bats. And the Cardinals just weren't blown away by it. Like, teams probably wanted Burleson. The Cardinals probably said, hey, could you go, Nootbaar? Or are they really to a point where they won't even talk Newt Bar? I don't know. But if they were also being just offered like AA prospects, I can kind of understand why you wouldn't want to part. You needed to find a controllable arm of some sort, and you're not getting that for any of those pieces individually. And so that's probably why it doesn't come together. But you're right. I would be very curious to know, because I can remember 2 years ago, everybody was going, Gorman or Donovan, who's better? And I would say, it's Brendan Donovan. That's easy. And it was like, well, Gorman can hit 40 home runs. I'm like, that's great. It's Brendan Donovan. And everybody now looks back and goes, why didn't you trade Gorman when his value was so high? It used to be higher than Donovan's. And I would say, no, it wasn't. That's why they didn't trade him. Because if a team called, remember, it was the Mariners' young starters.
Oh, man.
You know, all the ones that
Brian
didn't
Wu
get traded.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
the ones that are all still Mariners because
Yep.
they're good. And so everybody said, well, I can't believe they didn't trade Gorman for Brian Wu. It's like, but what if the Mariners also said Brendan Donovan was the more attractive one at the time? And if we're going to trade anybody, it's going to be for that guy. Could you imagine a scenario? Because now everybody would agree pretty much universally that Donovan would be the better, more consistent player. But like, if at the time you on Twitter and YouTube could figure out that you know, it was one way and not the other, how don't you think other MLB teams also had that same opinion? That's sort of what I have used as my guide, and I don't think it's steered me wrong yet.
Well, and I agree with you. And I think too, the important thing for the Cardinals is not so much, you know, you mentioned AJ Preller and Jerry Dipoto because they're the proverbial gunslingers. They will make deals. With the Cardinals, when they were successful, Mo actually did have a successful trading resume at one point in time, but he always identified trading partners really well, right? And so the guys like Newt Bar, the guys like Donovan, the guys like Gorman, so on and so, these guys might not appeal to a Dodgers team or a Mets team who doesn't have any trouble going out and spending $60 million to get a guy who might have comparable statistics to these. But there are 10 teams in Major League Baseball, Tampa, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, those sort of teams that are going to live in this world of how do we find guys with upside and cost control. Okay. And it's like Heim needs to now reestablish those sort of connections with those teams. And they need to find the guys who Tampa does not want to pay. They need to find the guys that Oakland, Sacramento, Las Vegas doesn't want to pay. You know, like that's kind of where I think this team needs to go, because I would tell you that I think if you are Oakland, Sacramento, Las Vegas, a guy like Nolan Gorman makes a ton of sense to you because you know what? Big upside. He's got some experience, maybe needs a change of scenery. So maybe, we're willing to deal one of these guys who's 2 years away from free agency or a year, who we know is getting a big deal and that sort of thing. So I think if you're Heim, the key is not adding $100 million in payroll this offseason. Because I just, you and I have talked about this before, Brendan. You'll never convince me that short of the Bryce Harpers and Juan Soto's of the world, and honestly, Kyle Tucker falls into that sort of he may this offseason. But again, it's not reasonable to expect that the Cardinals are going to be a team that dumps $500 million into a player. You don't need free agents, and the mid-tier free agents have been more often than not bad for this team. So we don't need to sit there and say, let's go find another Dexter Fowler. Let's go find, another Brett Cecil. That free agency in and of itself
Mike
is flawed.
Leake.
When you swim in the middle tier, you get these guys who are on the wrong end of 30 and
you overpaid for them.
More years, more money than they're worth, that sort of thing.
Yep.
So, you know what? Get back to the trade market. Somebody made a mention about the 40-man roster. The 40-man roster needs to be churned, right? Like you can't just keep stockpiling guys who, you got to make decisions on these guys. And I think you could theoretically, the hope would be that you could package 2 or 3 of these guys who the Cardinals still don't have a great sense of what they are and try to find some decent value with a team that might say, you give us Lars Nootbaar and Nolan Gorman, they were starting 162 games for us next year. That's great. And it clears up stuff. And if you can improve your quality, then I think you got to do it. And I really hope, we've said this a bunch. John Mosalic's downfall became the fact that he became gun shy on trades after he lost a couple, right? Like when that happened and he relied solely on free agency to fill voids with the team, that's when it all fell apart for this group. So again, I would hope that you mentioned Chaim Bloom learning lessons from his time. I would hope 1,000% you're right, that he becomes maybe a little bit less cautious with this and realizes that the mix the Cardinals currently have is not working and they need to do something different. That's
and
what I
trust
would
your
say.
judgment. Like, trust your own ability to execute your role rather than agonize over a trade. Go, hey, I recognize a deficiency here. I recognize that it takes talent to acquire talent. This is the way to move forward. I'm going to make this trade. I'm going to execute it. And I'm not going to look back, because if I'm looking back, I'm not looking forward at the next one, at the next way to improve the team. So that, to me, because we've talked a lot about, hey, when Heim comes in, here comes the reshaping of the 40-man. And, like, in theory, that can happen. I think the front office needs to be on it, and the ownership group needs to be allowing for the next guy coming in to do his job. Don't get in the way of the progress if the guy's ready to make it. That would be the other part. But if Heim Bloom has the characteristic where it's like, if he's going to act kind of in that same way where, I don't want to make the wrong move, you can't. Trust that they gave you the job for a reason and go be great. That's all you can try and do. And if you swing and you miss, well, then it will be time for a rebuild, and we won't have to, hide about it anymore and deny that it's, maybe something that they need. That you just got to go after it, jump in with both feet.
I'd much rather they swing and miss than not swing at all. All content on STL Sports Central is presented by DraftKings. And Brendan, you well know that nothing beats relaxing on a hot summer day like today and watching baseball, even when it is not great baseball. But the simplest way to get in on the action is to download the Pick Six app from DraftKings. It is crazy simple. Just pick more or less on the stats for two or more of your favorite players, and boom, you are in the mix for big cash prizes. Pick Six is available right here in Missouri. Don't miss out on the fun. Don't settle for a smaller payout. Switch to Pick Six, and right now, new customers can get $25 in bonus picks with their first deposit of $5. All you need to do is download the DraftKings Pick Six app now and use code STL Sports. That's code STL Sports for new customers to get $25 in bonus picks with their first deposit of $5. Better payouts, bigger wins, only with Pick Six from DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 and over. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick Six not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. One per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick Six credits that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See terms at picksix.draftkings.com/promos.
Cards lose 4-3 to the Yankees in the first game of their weekend series. They fall to 61-62 on the year. Two more games against the Yanks. They'll see. The funny thing, again, like we mentioned, Brendan, still 3.5 games out of the wild card. So technically, this thing isn't over. And let's just get hot. Speaking of hot, JJ Weatherholt, another home run tonight in Memphis. I don't know, man. I mean, again, like,
yeah.
It's what does he got? 40 games in AAA at this point in time, 30, something like that. I mean, he's brand new to the thing, but he seems to be well advanced for AAA pitching at this point in time. We go back and forth on this. I don't doubt that that JJ Weatherholt could come up and produce at the bigs right now. There's really no point in my mind in him doing it. I mean, and again, we're not in there for the intricacies of his his development as a player. He seems to, I know they're moving him around position wise, so on and so forth, but I don't know if there's a great reason to bring him up other than he's earned it. I guess that's probably an okay one, but by the same token, I don't know that it's going to help this team. And I don't know that it's smart even to push it at this point in time, because I don't know. I mean, I go back and forth with Weatherholt. I want to reward a guy who's done great things in a short period of time at AAA. By the same token, I mean, I think this is a lost year in a lot of different ways. And I think that, there's no point in not letting him ripen, at the AAA level, get him 150 games at AAA. I don't know. I mean, what are your thoughts?
The question is, like, what do you consider to be his pathway for 2026? If it's coming to spring training and if he really impresses, then he gets a job. You also have to know and have the trust that they are going to make the necessary trades to clear up the space for him to play it, whether it's third base, second base, those are kind of the options, because Mason's going to be at short.
Yep.
So, like, in my head, it would be completely brainless not to make sure you've cleared that space up if you think he's close to ready, but they could also very well slow play it. That would be dumb, because I think he's going to be ready for big league baseball at some point in 2026. And I'd just as soon see that be right away, because I do think there is value to the idea that he could burst onto the scene and be a rookie of the year candidate and could net you a draft pick. You want to talk about, rewarding excellence and then potentially putting your organization in position to jumpstart itself with something like a compensation draft pick between the first and second round, that has value. And so, like, I would be looking to what's the best way that I can set JJ Weatherholt up to be that if we think he's really that caliber of prospect. Mason Winn in 2023 did come up at the end, and that was a lost year. I mean, they stunk. Brought him up, and so, like, I don't want to necessarily hear.
And we all thought he couldn't hit. That was the problem.
I mean, he was betting 150. It was crazy. He had like 150 or 170 in that cup of coffee. They did it right where they assured he had rookie eligibility for the next year, less than 45 days on the roster, not enough at bats to clear rookie eligibility. Came into spring, and that was when they signed Brandon Crawford late because of Mason having like a little bit of a back ailment. And they said, we kind of figured this guy was our shortstop. We better have a backup plan. And they overpaid for Crawford out of that was another situation that they bungled because 3 depth shortstops had signed the same week. And then they realized maybe we should get one. We thought all these guys would be available. And then they all started signing.
Let's get the oldest one.
The oldest one who wasn't a good fit because he wanted to play in Arizona at spring training. And the Cardinals probably had to double their offer to get him here. I don't know that for sure, but it felt like $2 million for Crawford at this point, really. So my point with this is he didn't hit well, but they knew Mason Winn was going to have that role the next year. That was a lost environment that they brought him into that sometimes for a young player, that's a weird spot. Like he's trying to find his way in the big leagues and the team is a dumpster fire. This team isn't a dumpster fire. They're not particularly good. They're middling, but they're not like they were in 2023. They're somewhat competitive still. So I don't worry about it from that perspective. You have to have somewhere to play him. If, Brendan Donovan's banged up here, Arenado, we don't know. That's the other part of this is if you're bringing him up to play him every day once you're eligible to do it without ruining his rookie status. He's got 1,000 OPS. Jack Caglione had 1,000 OPS in a couple of weeks for the Royals, and they called him up, and it didn't really go that well. No. Same draft class, drafted right next to each other. I think he's going to end up being fine, and I think Weatherholt would be fine if he was. But my thing is this: if he's in your plans for next year, expose him to it now. Do I care that he's not someone you have to protect from the Rule 5 draft? I do not, because if we're really going to hem and haw over the 40-man roster again, boy, we got a different conversation to be having. Because again, all due respect to all the players, you can find the spots. Yes, I know they've got 5 or 7 guys that they have to protect from the minors. You can find the spots. And so I don't want that to be what's driving the decision. If they think he's ready, let's just let it be an evaluative decision. If they think he's ready, expose him to the big leagues now so he can get a leg up on what it's like. Because we see all the times rookies come up to the big leagues. There are things you don't know until you know. You can't know what it's like to go through it until you've been a part of it. Mason Winn went through it. Alec Burleson at one time went through it. All these young players go through it, and it opens their eyes to okay, this is what it's about in the big leagues. To me, it can benefit Weatherholt to have 5 weeks of that if he's going to be part of next year's team in a significant way. I would be for it, but again, it would almost need to be they shut Donnie down because of an injury. They shut Arenado down because of an injury to make sure that they've got a spot for Weatherholt. If their evaluation is he's polished enough and he can handle this, then I would be willing to do it once that 45-day mark is gone, which is like any day now. That would be the case.
Yep. This offseason has the possibility to be a ton of fun. I don't know that it will be, again, especially
I hate to psych myself up. But you're right. It should be. It should be a transformative winter. I mean, because
there are so many forks in this road that they can go down. And that's what makes this fun. JJ Weatherholt's promotion pending is just one little piece of drama. And again, just could be a very, very fun part. It's all chain reaction moves. What they do with Arenado is going to affect what they do with Donovan and Gorman and eventually Weatherholt. And so much fun. And again, we got 40 more games to play in this season. Who knows? The Cardinals still 3.5 games out of the wild card.
You can't say that. Can't say that. People get mad. They don't like to hear that.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
It's true. It's simultaneously true. And in defense of fans who are tired of hearing about it, it's almost laughable. But when it's only 3.5 and not 5.5, when it's 3.5, you're a series away from going, hey, we wake up and we're today we win and we're in the playoffs. So when it's that close, it's like a series is the gap that you're talking about. It's hard to not at least make mention of it. But when we do that, understand that we see what you see. They're below 500. Something's got to change if they're going to make up that gap.
100%. Brenden, thanks for the time tonight, brother. I greatly
Yes, sir.
appreciate it. He is Brenden Schaeffer. I'm Chris Pelikan. This has been Card Central postgame right here on STL Sports Central. Cards go again tomorrow against the Yankees. The marquee pitching matchup of the weekend, Max Fried against Sonny Gray. So we'll be back for another one of these things tomorrow. And for Brenden, I'm Chris. We will see you guys tomorrow right here on STL Sports Central.